I was 18 when my dad crushed my dreams. Standing in our living room, college acceptance letter in hand, I watched him choose my cousin over me. For 18 years, he had promised to pay for my education, but in that moment I learned his promise meant nothing. The money saved for my future was given to Kyle. The betrayal cut deep, watching my family favor him over their own son. Before I share this heartbreaking story, let me know where you are watching from and hit subscribe so you will not miss stories that touch your heart like this one. I grew up in a middle-class family in Chicago. My father, William, worked as a structural engineer, while my mother, Sandra, taught elementary school. We were not wealthy by any means, but we were comfortable, and I never wanted for anything important. Our family life was warm and loving for most of my childhood. Dad would take me fishing on weekends, help with science projects, and attend every school event. We would spend evenings discussing books, current events, and my future plans. He always emphasized the importance of education, telling me stories about how he had struggled through college, working multiple jobs. He would pat my shoulder and say, "That is why I am saving for your education, Jameson. I want you to focus on learning, not worrying about money." Mom was the emotional backbone of our family. She would mediate disagreements, plan family outings, and make sure our home felt safe and nurturing. Looking back, those early years created a foundation of trust that made the later betrayal even more painful. I had no reason to doubt my parents loved me equally or that they would keep their promises to me. My cousin Kyle entered my life when I was 8 years old. His parents, my Uncle Alan and Aunt Patricia, had just gone through a bitter divorce that left Alan struggling financially. Kyle was 6, then a skinny kid with bright eyes and an infectious laugh. He started spending weekends at our house, while Uncle Alan worked extra shifts to make ends meet. At first, Kyle and I were inseparable. We built elaborate forts in the backyard, rode bikes through neighborhood streets until sunset, and stayed up late playing video games when our parents thought we were sleeping. I taught him how to throw a perfect spiral with a football, and he showed me card tricks his grandfather had taught him. During summer breaks, we would go to the community pool together, challenging each other to underwater handstands and diving competitions. "You are like the brother I never had," Kyle told me once, and I felt the same way. Those early years with Kyle were some of the happiest of my childhood. The first signs that something was changing appeared when I was 16 and Kyle was 14. Dad started spending more one-on-one time with Kyle. They would go to baseball games without inviting me, claiming it was uncle-nephew bonding time. Dad never seemed to need father-son bonding time with me anymore. Then came the gifts. For Christmas, Kyle received a brand new gaming laptop while I got clothes and books. When Kyle mentioned interest in photography, Dad bought him a professional camera the following week. When I asked about upgrading my 3-year-old phone, Dad lectured me about appreciating what I had. "Kyle does not have the advantages you have, Jameson," he would say. "His father is struggling. We need to support him more." I understood that logic, but it still hurt. What made it harder to swallow was that Kyle was thriving academically. He was taking advanced placement classes, winning science competitions, and getting recognized by teachers. At every family gathering, Dad would boast about Kyle's accomplishments, while mine went unmentioned. Mom noticed the pattern too. I overheard her talking to Dad one night, her voice tense with concern. "William, you are favoring Kyle over Jameson. Our son notices it too." "That is ridiculous," Dad replied. "I love them both equally. Kyle just needs more support right now." I tried not to let it bother me. After all, Kyle was family too, and he had been through a lot. Besides, Dad still talked about my college fund and how he had been saving since I was born. That promise kept me going through the increasing discomfort of watching Dad's affection shift toward my cousin. Throughout high school, I poured myself into academics and extracurriculars with Northwestern University as my target. I wanted to study architecture, combining my love of art and mathematics into a career designing buildings that would stand the test of time. I joined the debate team, volunteered at a local architecture firm on weekends, and maintained a 4 gigapascals. Dad and I would often discuss my college plans, looking through brochures together and calculating costs. "Northwestern is expensive," he would say, "but we have been preparing for this. Do not worry about the money, son. Just focus on getting in." When my SAT results came back in the top percentile, Dad proudly put the score report on the refrigerator. For a brief moment, I felt like I had his attention again. The acceptance letter from Northwestern arrived on a rainy April afternoon during my senior year. I remember the weight of the envelope in my hands, the surge of excitement as I tore it open. I had been accepted to one of the top architecture programs in the country. I called Mom at work and she screamed with joy. When Dad came home that evening, he hugged me tightly. "I knew you could do it, Jameson," he said, his eyes shining with pride. "Let us celebrate this weekend." That weekend we had a small family dinner. Uncle Alan and Kyle joined us, and Kyle announced he had been accepted to Stanford with a partial scholarship. The table erupted in congratulations, and Dad raised his glass in a toast. "To Kyle and Jameson," he said. "The future is bright for both of you." Little did I know that my future was about to be sacrificed for Kyle's. The evening that changed everything happened 2 weeks after my acceptance letter arrived. I had been researching dorm options and creating a list of supplies I would need for my first semester. Dad called me downstairs for a family meeting. Mom sat on the couch, her expression unreadable. Dad paced the living room, not meeting my eyes. "Jameson," he began, clearing his throat, "we need to discuss your college plans." My stomach dropped. Something in his tone made me instantly wary. "There has been a change in our financial situation," he continued. "I am afraid we cannot afford to pay for Northwestern as we planned." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. "What do you mean? You have been saving for my college fund since I was born. You always said that was taken care of." Dad shifted uncomfortably. "The economy has been difficult. Investments did not perform as expected. We can help with some expenses, but you will need to take out student loans for most of it." Mom looked as surprised as I felt. "William, this is the first I am hearing about this. What happened to Jameson's college fund?" Dad shot her an irritated glance. "Sandra, we discussed this. The money is not there anymore. Something did not add up. My parents' jobs were stable. There had been no major expenses or emergencies." I felt a creeping suspicion, but I could not quite put it together yet. "How much can you contribute?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "About 10,000, Dad replied, not meeting my eyes. "Maybe 15. Northwestern would cost over 60,000 per year." This was not a small shortfall. This was a complete reversal of everything we had planned. Later that night, I could not sleep. Questions churned in my mind. Where had the money gone? Why had Dad not warned me earlier so I could have applied for more scholarships or chosen a more affordable school? The answer came 3 days later. I had stayed late at school working on a project and returned home earlier than expected. As I approached the front door, I heard voices from the back patio. Dad and Uncle Alan were talking, their voices carrying through the open window. "I cannot thank you enough," Uncle Alan was saying. "This opportunity means everything to Kyle. Stanford is a dream come true. He deserves it," Dad replied. "That boy has incredible potential. With his brain, he could cure cancer someday." But taking Jameson's college fund, Uncle Alan said, his voice lowering, "Are you sure about this? What about your son?" My blood turned to ice. I froze beside the window, hardly breathing. "Jameson can take out loans like most kids do," Dad said dismissively. "Or go to community college first. Kyle's scholarship only covers part of Stanford. This is his one shot. Jameson will have other opportunities." "Does Sandra know?" Uncle Alan asked. "Not the full extent," Dad admitted. "She thinks I only gave Kyle a small portion. She would not understand." I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over the porch furniture. My father had taken the money saved for my education and given it to my cousin. The betrayal was so complete, so unexpected, that I could not process it immediately. I walked around the block for an hour, trying to calm myself before confronting him. When I finally returned home, I found Dad alone in the kitchen. "I heard your conversation with Uncle Alan," I said, my voice shaking. "You gave my college fund to Kyle." Dad's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, closed it, then sighed heavily. "You were not supposed to find out like this." "How was I supposed to find out?" I demanded. "When exactly were you planning to tell me?" "You gave away my future." "You are being dramatic," Dad snapped. It is not your whole future, just money. Kyle has more potential. Stanford will open doors for him that you cannot imagine. The words hit like physical blows. And what about my potential? What about Northwestern? And everything I have worked for Kyle is special, Jameson. He could make real contributions to the world. His test scores are off the charts. And mine are not. I could not believe what I was hearing. Be realistic. Architecture is a fine career, but Kyle could be discovering new vaccines or technologies. The investment makes more sense for him. In that moment, I realized I had always been second best in my father's eyes. The cousin who visited on weekends had somehow become more important than his own son. Does Kyle know? Does he know you stole my future to fund his? I asked. Dad's expression hardened. I did not steal anything. It is my money, and I decided how to use it. And no, Kyle does not know, and you will not tell him. This would only hurt him unnecessarily. Mom arrived home during our argument. When she realized the full truth, she was furious. How could you do this, William? She demanded. How could you sacrifice our son's education without even discussing it with me, Sandra? You are not seeing the bigger picture, Dad insisted. Kyle needs this more than Jameson does. He is not your son, Mom. Shouted, tears streaming down her face. Maybe he should be. Dad muttered, then immediately looked shocked at his own words. The room went silent. That sentence revealed everything I needed to know about where I stood in my father's heart. Over the next weeks, I desperately searched for solutions. I applied for every last-minute scholarship I could find, but most deadlines had already passed. I looked into student loans, but even with the maximum amount, I would still fall short of what Northwestern required. I called the financial aid office to explain my situation, but they had limited emergency funds available. I picked up extra shifts at my part-time job at a local bookstore, knowing full well that no amount of minimum wage hours would make up the difference. I even reached out to my grandparents, but they were retired and living on a fixed income. Time was running out. The deposit deadline loomed, and I still had no solution. The final straw came in May when our extended family gathered to celebrate Kyle's acceptance to Stanford. Uncle Alan had organized a backyard barbecue, complete with a Stanford banner and cardinal red decorations. I attended only because Mom insisted it would look strange if I was absent. As we gathered around the patio table, Dad stood up to make a toast. Today, we celebrate Kyle's incredible achievement. He began beaming with pride. Stanford University is gaining a brilliant young mind, and I could not be prouder. Alan and I have made arrangements to ensure that Kyle can focus entirely on his studies without financial worry. Relatives applauded and congratulated Kyle, who looked genuinely happy and grateful. He had no idea of the sacrifice that had been made on his behalf, no knowledge of the resentment building inside me. What about you, Jameson? My Aunt Carla asked. Where will you be going in the fall? All eyes turned to me. I felt heat rising in my face. I am still deciding. I lied, unable to admit that my own father had derailed my plans. Jameson got into Northwestern, Mom added quickly, giving Dad a pointed look. We are very proud of him, too. The conversation moved on, but I felt invisible, erased from my own family's future plans. That night alone in my room, I made the hardest decision of my life. The next morning, I called Northwestern and declined my acceptance. My dream school would have to remain just that, a dream. Instead, I enrolled in the local community college with plans to transfer to a state university after completing my core requirements. It was not what I had worked for all through high school, but it was the only path forward I could see. I also decided I could not continue living at home. The betrayal was too fresh, the pain too constant. My friend Trevor had an apartment near the community college and needed a roommate to split costs. Within a week, I had packed my belongings and moved out. You are making a mistake, Dad said as I loaded the last box into Trevor's car. Running away will not solve anything. I am not running away, I replied. I am starting over because you left me no choice. Mom stood on the porch crying silently. She had tried to intervene, even offering to take money from her teacher's retirement fund, but I refused to let her compromise her own future because of Dad's betrayal. I will visit you, Mom, I promised, hugging her goodbye. This is not your fault." Dad and I did not hug. He stood stiffly by the garage, watching me leave. It would be the last time we spoke for nearly 8 years. The first year was the hardest. I worked 2 jobs, one at a coffee shop in the mornings and another at a hardware store on weekends. Between work and classes, I barely had time to sleep, let alone socialize. But the exhaustion had one benefit. It kept me too busy to dwell on my anger. At the community college, I excelled in my architecture and design courses. My professor, Dr. Rodriguez, took notice of my work and became a mentor. He had worked for major architecture firms before teaching and still maintained connections in the field. "You have real talent, Jameson," he told me after class one day. "Have you considered the transfer program with State University? Their architecture program is underrated, and they offer decent scholarships for transfer students." With Dr. Rodriguez's recommendation, I applied and was accepted with a partial scholarship. It was not Northwestern, but it was a solid program that would give me the education I needed. Mom secretly helped with some expenses, though I insisted on covering most costs myself through work and student loans. During my second year at State University, I joined a team working on a community revitalization project, redesigning an abandoned warehouse into an arts center. Our design won a regional competition and was featured in a small architecture journal. This small success gave me confidence that I could make it in the field despite the detour in my educational path. After graduation, I landed an internship at Jensen Design Associates, a respected firm in Chicago. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. I worked ridiculous hours, absorbed everything I could from the senior architects, and developed a unique approach that blended practical functionality with artistic elements. My supervisor, Mark Jensen, took me under his wing and allowed me to contribute to increasingly significant projects. "You have a fresh perspective," he told me. "You see possibilities where others see limitations." 3 years into my career, I was promoted to junior architect and given my first solo project, a small public library in a neighboring suburb. The design received positive reviews and attracted attention from others in the industry. I was beginning to make a name for myself. Around this time, Mom called to tell me news of Kyle. After 2 years at Stanford, he had dropped out. The pressure had been too much, and without genuine interest in his studies, he had floundered. He moved back in with Uncle Alan, unemployed and directionless. "Your father is devastated," Mom said. He believed so strongly that Kyle was destined for greatness. I felt no satisfaction in Kyle's failure, only sadness that so much had been sacrificed for nothing. Kyle had never asked for the preferential treatment, never realized the cost of the opportunity given to him. 5 years after graduation, I had saved enough money and built enough contacts to take a risk. Along with 2 colleagues from Jensen Design, I started Horizon Architecture, focusing on sustainable urban development. Our first year was terrifying, living on savings and working out of a tiny office, but we secured several small projects that showcased our innovative approach. One of our designs for an eco-friendly community center caught the attention of Green Building Quarterly, a respected industry publication. Their feature article led to larger commissions and established us as up-and-coming talents in sustainable architecture. Within 3 years, we had expanded to a team of 15 and moved to proper offices in downtown Chicago. At 30, I had achieved success on my own terms. I owned a modest but modern home in a good neighborhood, had financial stability, and was doing work that made me proud. I had also met Sophia, an environmental engineer, who collaborated with our firm on several projects. She was brilliant, kind, and understood my passion for creating spaces that served both people and the planet. Our relationship blossomed naturally, built on mutual respect and shared values. The call from Mom came on a Tuesday morning. "Your father wants to see you," she said, her voice careful. "He is not doing well, Jameson. The regret is eating him alive." "What does he want from me?" I asked. "Just to talk," she replied. "After all these years, maybe it is time." I agreed to think about it, but made no promises. 8 years of silence lay between us. 8 years of building a life without his support or guidance. Part of me wanted to hold on to the anger, to refuse him the forgiveness he sought. But another part, a part that had grown stronger with my own success, wondered if it was time to let go of the past. A week later, I was reviewing blueprints in my office when my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. William Harris, my father, stood in the reception area. The man who entered my office looked nothing like the strong, confident father of my youth. His hair had gone completely gray, his shoulders stooped slightly, and deep lines etched his face. His eyes, however, were the same, though now they carried a weight of sadness I had never seen before. "Jameson," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured to a chair across from my desk. "I did not know you were coming. I was afraid you would refuse if I called ahead." He sat down slowly, looking around at the awards and project photos on my walls. "You have done well for yourself. I saw the article about your firm in the Tribune." "What do you want, Dad?" I asked, not ready for small talk. He took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "I want to tell you that the biggest mistake of my life was betraying you. Not a day has gone by that I have not regretted what I did." I remained silent, studying the face of the man who had once been the center of my world. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing. He continued, "That Kyle needed the opportunity more, that his potential was greater. I was wrong, so terribly wrong. I sacrificed my relationship with my son for a fantasy." "What happened with Kyle?" I asked, though Mom had already told me most of it. Dad's expression crumpled. He was not ready for Stanford. The pressure was too much. He dropped out after the second year, all that money wasted. But that is not the point. Even if he had succeeded brilliantly, it would not have justified what I did to you. No, it would not have. I agreed. "I am not asking for forgiveness, Jameson. I do not deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did, and I live with that regret every day. The way you succeeded despite my failure as a father only highlights how wrong I was about everything." For years, I had imagined this moment, fantasized about telling him exactly how much he had hurt me. But facing the broken man before me, I felt the anger that had fueled me for so long begin to dissipate. "You know what the worst part was," I said finally. "Not the money. It was hearing you say Kyle deserved it more than I did, that he had more potential, that he was worth more to you than your own son." Dad wiped at his eyes. "I was blind. Completely blind. I think I saw in Kyle a second chance, a way to shape a young man's future without the mistakes I thought I had made with you. But you never needed fixing, Jameson. You were already everything a father could hope for in a son." We talked for nearly 2 hours that afternoon. He told me about his sleepless nights, about how my mother had nearly left him after I moved out, about the gradual disintegration of his relationship with Kyle once the money was gone. I told him about my struggles, my triumphs, the life I had built from the ruins of his broken promises. Neither of us mentioned reconciliation. Some bridges once burned cannot be easily rebuilt. But as he rose to leave, I felt something shift within me. "Would you like to see our current project?" I asked, impulsively gesturing to the blueprints on my desk. The surprise and hope in his eyes was answer enough. As I walked him through the designs for a sustainable community housing development, I saw genuine interest and pride in his expression. It was a small moment, but perhaps the beginning of something new. In the months that followed, we established a cautious relationship. Coffee every few weeks, occasional dinners with Mom. He met Sophia and made an effort to know her. When Horizon Architecture won a major award for innovation, he attended the ceremony sitting quietly in the back. The path to healing was not straight or easy. There were still moments of resentment, conversations that ended abruptly when old wounds were accidentally reopened. But gradually, we found a way forward. Looking back on my journey, I realized that my father's betrayal, painful as it was, had forced me to find strength I never knew I possessed. The hardship had tempered me, teaching me self-reliance and resilience. Would I have chosen this difficult path? Never. But I could acknowledge that it had shaped me into someone I was proud to be. I also learned that true success comes not from external validation or advantages given to you, but from unwavering determination and belief in yourself. Every brick in the foundation of my career had been laid by my own hands. There was a profound satisfaction in that knowledge. Perhaps most importantly, I discovered that holding on to anger only limits your own freedom. Forgiveness is not about excusing the wrong done to you, but about releasing yourself from the burden of resentment. Finding peace did not mean forgetting the past, it meant refusing to let it control my future. Sometimes the longest and most difficult road leads to the best destination, not where we expect it to be, but where we belong. What has been your experience with family betrayal? Have you found a way to rebuild trust, or did you need to create boundaries? Share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit subscribe and like to support more authentic life stories. Thank you for listening, and remember that your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see your value.